Alright, welcome back. We are just a little bit under 24 hours before the version 2.2 is released. Now, we are also very close to the anniversary of the game, which should be after this update, and I've heard that version 2.2, the update in 2.2, is a bit shorter than the 2.3 update. But today I want to talk about something that kind of happened, I guess. Something that a lot of players have been worried about, rightfully worried about, because we kind of have seen the same thing happen with a different game a couple years ago. Now, to just make things shorter, I've heard and I've read that Apple met with Kuro Games. Now, originally I did not plan to cover this. I thought that someone else will cover the current topic, but it seems like everyone is a little bit distracted by the new Cantarella PV character trailer. And honestly, I don't blame the players for being distracted. That's a very good trailer, especially the last 25 seconds of it that are that caught me by surprise. It caught everyone by surprise. That animation is so well done. You can see that the budget's been used wisely, to say the least. That's a very good trailer. I love it. But at the same time, there are other things that I believe are more important, other things that could potentially have significant impact on the overall game experience for a big portion of the player base. Now, as we already heard, Apple met with Kuro Games, and when you think about that, it doesn't sound that bad. That is until you go back a couple years and realize, oh, the same thing happened with MiHoYo and Genshin. They also have met a long time ago. And then you realize, oh, that's around the same time where we started to see the Android version of the game being a little bit neglected, to say the least. When I say neglected, I mean just take an iPhone and take a flagship Android, take two flagships of both ecosystems, launch Genshin at the same time, and just put them side by side basically, right? And look at the graphics, for example. On Android, I played the game a month ago, tested the game out. The game looks horrendous. Blurry, very blurry, extremely low resolution, and it seems like the overall graphics of the game have been reduced. I don't remember the game looking that bad a couple years ago when I played it for the first time. And then you look at the iOS version of the game, no blur, the game looks crystal clear. 120 FPS support, which is still lacking on Android, by the way. It has upscaling. Android doesn't get upscaling, and the most important feature, controller support. It's nearly 5 years and there is still no controller support on Android. However, I've heard that they're adding it, but honestly at this point I would say that's a little bit too late. Just a tiny bit too late for that to be added. 5 years, and they're adding it now. Like, really? Clicking one box in Unity, it took them 5 years to do. That's a little bit embarrassing, to be honest. But that all can be traced back to them meeting up with Apple. As players have said, they sign a contract, exclusivity contract, as players like to call it, that gives iOS exclusive stuff, and perhaps even purposely worsening performance and purposely excluding features on Android just to make iOS and Apple devices look better on that game. And naturally, players will be worried that will the same thing happen to Wuthering Waves. No, I'm worried myself because there are indications of that already happening. One such thing being the non-existent implementation of Vulkan into Wuthering Waves. And that also brings us to the question, well, what can they actually add exclusively to Apple if, let's say, they sign a contract? In a hypothetical situation, if they do that, I'm out of the game. I'm never gonna play the game ever again if they do that. That's me. Such, let's say, bias, for lack of better word, such bias towards certain platform, or in this case, towards a certain brand, is a huge no for me at least. And I have a habit of abandoning the game that does that. The second I even smell that happening, I'm out. And I have no... I would have no remorse deleting the game and uninstalling if they do that. Because I believe that as a game developer, it's their duty to give all the platforms that they support the best possible experience without trampling a platform over for favorism. If they do that, I'm out. It's simple as that. Like, if they show favoritism, I'm out. Either treat all of them equally or don't treat them equally at all. In other words, it's still going to be equal, equally unequal. So, back to the topic here. What could they possibly do next if this rumor is true, if it's actually happening, if they're doing the same thing that MiHoYo is doing with Genshin, then the iOS version of the game will get ray tracing, we'll probably get 120 FPS support, and we'll probably get things like better graphics and stuff like that. Meanwhile, the Android version will get none of that, and the Android version of the game will look, as I mentioned before, neglected, and it will look outdated and bad. Performance-wise, it will also deteriorate, because the OpenGL is just terrible. Even now, it's actually running in OpenGL. There is no traces of Vulkan at all, which is bad, because 8 Elite, 8 Elite 2, 8 Elite 2 especially, that chip will not run the game well at all, because of the heat that it will produce just to achieve 60 FPS, because of the outdated API. We already see the problem with the 8 Elite, the first one, that hits 101 degrees Celsius on the game. So, players' concern is valid, because we already had this happen in the past. And at the same time, there's so many things that are currently in the current moment of time here, the versions iOS and Android are, I would say, about the same. And the only difference is the app scanning technology. On iOS, you don't have FSR, you don't have stuff like that, you only have metal effects. On the Android version, you have FSR. And I think maybe other techniques in the future, I don't know. But that's the only difference. The anti-aliasing is the same, the upscaling is the difference, because iOS doesn't support FSR and stuff like that. But currently, when we look at the overall FPS differences and stuff like that, on Android and on iOS, at least when it comes to phones, you don't have a 120 FPS option. On PC you have. I go on my PC, I can tweak it to make it 120 FPS, but they can still take that technically away from Android. They can still take away ray tracing from Android. They can still do things like that if they do the exclusivity deal, as again players like to call it. I don't even know if it's a deal or if it's something else. That's just a term that I picked up from reading all the comments out there. And if you compare the same situation on Genshin, for example, on PC, on a literal PC, you still have 60 FPS, no 120 FPS option. Meanwhile, on iOS you have 120 FPS, which makes no sense from a technical performance standpoint. A PC will always and always be more powerful than a handheld device. Doesn't matter how expensive the device, the phone or tablet is, a PC will always have more performance. Yet, the FPS option in that game is also blocked on PC on 60. Honkai Star Rail is also one of the more recent games that got 120 FPS support on iOS. Meanwhile, on Android, you are still stuck at 60. So, naturally, as already said before, players will be worried. Are Android players going to get the short end of the stick yet again? Well, I would say that's in Kuro's hands now. We as players, I don't really think we can do much about that, what they decide to do. If they end up doing stuff like that I would consider to be unfair to a big portion of the player base. That's what I'm saying. That's why I said that it potentially will affect a huge portion of the total player base. Now, on my device here, I can actually see how many players are playing the game on my particular device brand, which is, I would say, by far not even close to the largest pool of brand that's playing the game. I believe Samsung is definitely on the lower end player count wise. But just let me quickly go and open the game hub here, and let's take a look at details of Wuthering Waves real quick. So in the last 32 weeks, it started with 150,000 players, and this week 106,000 players. So the game has roughly around 150 to 160,000 players totally within the last 32 weeks. The number has been dropping though, because again, players just don't want to be exposed to OpenGL anymore, and a lot of players just uninstall because they look at the API, they don't see Vulkan, they see bad performance, they just go. And the number is dropping actually. Last 16 weeks, it went from 126,000 to 111,000, then it jumped to 127,000, and then from the last 8 weeks to present week, it's been dropping to 106,000 players. In the last 4 weeks, from 116 to 106, it has ups and downs, and in the last 7 days, it looks a little bit better. It seems that, actually no, it seems a bit more stable, but it's still slightly dropping off. So, that's just how many players are playing the game on a Samsung device. Xiaomi, Poco, OnePlus, and other brands are more, I would say, more popular with the game, and I would say there's a lot more players who play the game on those devices, and this is also limited to my region only, which does give us a rough estimate of how many players are potentially affected by this. Maybe a couple 100,000 million players affected by this change. That's how many players will have to play the game knowing that their platform, their device is being given the short end of the stick. Doesn't matter if it's a high-end, medium-end, or a top-tier flagship device. Especially, I would say it's especially unfair to the flagships, because some of my phone, for example, this thing I'm using right now, I paid close to €1,000, $1,000. I don't really know the exact conversion to it, but it's been quite expensive. And to this day, no game properly, actually one game only, 1 to 2 games only, took proper advantage of the hardware. And that's pretty sad, because this device is getting, 2 years old now, nearly 1.5 years old. And nothing is able to fully take advantage of it because of poor developer decisions and terrible API that we see being used on this platform for no reason. And I don't really know what much to say, to be honest. As I mentioned before, it's all down to what Kuro does next. I really hope that I'm wrong about them actually going ahead with this, because if they do, well, I mean, I will uninstall the game and I'll never play the game ever again on a mobile device, at least. Because I would say it's really not fair to the players. It's a big portion of the market, a big portion of the player base that plays on Android. It's not fair towards these players to have them play the game knowingly that they're not getting everything that they could get, content wise, quality of life wise, performance wise. It would be very unfair to them. At the same time, it would also be fair to iOS if Android got all the good things. I believe that a balance needs to exist, as I mentioned before, to treat both platforms equally. It's not too hard. Both platforms are capable. Both platforms have good devices. Both platforms have decent hardware. And honestly, in this day and age, there is literally no reason why one platform would get stuff that the other platform wouldn't get or doesn't get. So this is why I'm saying that everyone being distracted with the trailer, that's fine, it's fine to be distracted by a good trailer, but this potentially is a problem. And I think we don't want Wuthering Waves to end up like Genshin Impact, because that game isn't doing that well right now. Players are unhappy, rightfully so. Players have all the right to be unhappy and angry, because let's face it, that game is... that game has and had some very bad decisions in the past, development-wise. Very bad decisions development-wise. And I don't want to have to go through the same thing with Wuthering Waves, especially since this game has so much potential. It's a very good game, and it would be such a bad move to just lock things on one platform. I think at this point people would notice that if they start to just lock things on iOS only, that they would connect one and one and just realize, they met a contract. Your purpose of doing that just for the sake of the contract, which in some certain terms can actually be classified as bias. Players will be mad, to say the least, and rightfully so. Again, who wants to be treated as second class? No one. Especially when it comes to games. I'm thinking, like, I'm imagining myself, putting myself in the shoes of someone who bought a 8 Elite device that cost several $1,000s or euros to launch the game and to have features restricted or unavailable to them. I would be pretty mad. I'm still mad with my device here, that I'm unable to take full advantage of it. So that's where we are at the moment. I hope that this is a nothing burger. I really hope that this video ages like milk, If this video ages like milk, I'll be happy. If it ages like wine, that would be bad, because if it ages like wine, then I was right. And if I was right, that's not good. This is one of the occasions where being wrong is actually the good thing, because if I'm wrong and if it's a nothing burger, then both platforms get same features, and both platforms get the best the game has to offer, and everyone is happy. It is a win-win situation. If one platform gets stuff and the other doesn't get stuff, that will make players mad, and that's bad. That's pretty much the thing that it boils down to. So yeah, tell me what you think about this whole situation. And I'm trying to remember if I missed something that I want to talk about. But I think I covered all of it. I think I covered the most important topic, at least. And this is, this video's purpose is kind of to just talk about it, raise awareness of what's happening and potential problems, just so, we can come to a conclusion whether, if it's a thing that's, a nothing burger, or if it's a legit thing that could potentially alienate a big portion of the player base from the game, because this is one of those touchy subjects where if they mess up, and I don't want them to go the same route MiHoYo did with Genshin. That would be pretty disappointing, to say the least. Would go against what Kuro stands for, we promise, we deliver stuff, right? Their slogan, love the game, love yourself, love the player. Or, I just made a variation of it, but you get what I'm trying to say. What if they start to do what I think they might start doing, then they will practically trample over the thing that they're standing for. And it would probably be the start, if they do it, of course, in a hypothetical situation. If they do it, then they will be MiHoYo 2.0 with Wuthering Waves. And that would be pretty disappointing, and that would be pretty sad. But with that being said, tell me what you guys think about this. Again, all comments are welcomed. I want to see what you guys think about this whole situation. And if you have any other information regarding this, feel free to let me know. I'm all ears. As I mentioned before, as a content creator, it's my duty to point things like these out and to see what the community thinks about it. That's, I think, the most important thing that I can do for the game and for the community in general. But yeah, tell me what you think about it, and I'll see you next time.